Man, I think Brandy's been getting reports, and it seems this latest barrage of attacks has rendered some of our brethren without power and heat, water, and just the basic things. And so let's continue to pray for them as they go through, things to no fault of their own, caught up really in the middle of wickedness and evil, hatred. And may God, bless them and help them. You might be turning to 2 Corinthians chapter 12. I think we got down last time to about verse 6. Paul, at chapter 11, has been explaining some things to the Corinthians. He's been identifying some that have come in among them to harm them. He said they were deceitful workers. He called them ministers of Satan, and he informed the church that what they had done in actuality is transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, he says. He pointed them out as boasters. And the church at Corinth, it seemed, was influenced by this. And so he feels compelled to highlight, to show them, see, what a true apostle is, what a true minister of righteousness looks like, what a true servant looks like. And so he details this lengthy list of his infirmities. Now, this would be contrasted with heritage and vocabulary, things along those lines. He would point out things that showed his need for God, but they would also reflect his diligent love and work, his hard work in the gospel as it related to the church. He said, this great concern I have for all the churches, and it certainly, as he pointed out, he was the father of this church. He was their father in the gospel, he's pointed out, and he certainly cared for them. And he wanted them to see this great gulf between these false apostles, these super apostles, and what a real apostle would look like. That ought to be clear to them. And he points out they certainly had plenty of chances to set the record straight on his behalf if they had chosen to do so. So he lays out this list in defense, it seems, in contrast to what they were doing. Well, he introduces another element of him being approved by God. He says, not only, have I gone through a lot, sufferings and persecution, distresses and needs. In fact, I'm going to come, he says, to visions and revelations. Now that's a separate class, isn't it? For God to show you special things. He brings up a man. He said, I knew a man about 14 years ago that had been caught up into the third heaven, he says. And he also said this man had been caught up into paradise. We pointed out last week that if this third heaven isn't the heaven where God is, then I don't know what it means at all. And if this paradise isn't the paradise in heaven, then I don't know much about where this man was caught up to. There is a paradise in heaven. It's why I mentioned, I thought it was heaven, that this man, Paul said, now I don't know whether he was carried up there, his body, or I don't know whether he just went there, his spirit left his body, and he was carried up in spirit. But he said, God knows, and that's what matters. That's all that matters. But in Revelations 2, at verse 7, he who has ears, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. So there is a paradise of God. The tree of life is obviously depicted for us in the heavens where God is in the book of Revelations. And so just by proximity, that would be this, that's where this place would be. But if it's not that paradise, then I don't know, I don't know anything about this, about this paradise, but I think it is heaven. We do know there is a Hadean world that has a place called paradise. Jesus went there, and we pointed that out last week. So I take it that there's two just that's been revealed to us. There might be 20 of them. But the point being two is pointed out for us distinctly, it seems to me. One in the heavens where God is, and then one where all the dead go, where Jesus was for 3 days, and where he told the thief on the cross, this day you'll be with me in paradise. Paul said that this man was a Christian too, and he points that out for us. Let me let them get seated. Y'all take your time, please. Yeah, you take your sweet time. In 2 Peter chapter 3, let me read this. I referred to it last week, but I don't know how to approach this chapter really without mentioning this. And even what we're going to study today, I think we may make it through. We may not, but I think we'll get close. But in 2 Peter 3, Peter said about some of the things that Paul wrote. He said this, and consider that the long suffering of our Lord is salvation, as also our beloved brother Paul, according to the wisdom given to him, has written to you, as also, now listen to this now, in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which untaught and unstable people twist to their own destruction, as they also do the rest of the scriptures. I find this section meaty, weighty, hard to understand. This chapter 11 and 12. Now, not some of the particulars, but the back and forth, the sense in which he's speaking, the particular details, like for instance, is this talking about, is he the man? Or is this a man that he knew? See? And there's arguments on both sides of that. I mentioned last week, I hold the view that he knew a man. That wasn't him, just that he knew a man. And but it might very well be him. So as you go through, and he's in one breath he says, "Now I'm not going to boast. I'm not going to boast," and then he boasts. See? Okay, so you have to reconcile. Okay, so now what's up with that? You see, I got a long list of boastings, and then he says, "But I'm just going to boast in my infirmities." and then he's gone, this back and forth. And so to reconcile it all, to harmonize it is some of the toughness in my judgment that it deals with. But be that as it may, but it's weightier than that. I'll point some out as we go. Like, for example, when we get to verse 6, maybe you can be thinking ahead. What does verse 6 say? Just what does it say? And if you know, I want you to tell us, and I don't mean that, I mean, share it with us, please. All right? But, so, having said that, what we want to know ourselves and what we certainly want to make sure our young people know is the fact that we can't understand something, we're not going to throw the whole Bible away. That's just, we're battling that now every day, and our young people are, as they question the scriptures, its validity, as they question its inspiration, see, because of some of the ambiguity, because of some of the perceived contradictions and things along those lines. Well, point out to them what Peter said. Paul, in all his epistles, he wrote some things that you're going to have to really dig deep to understand. He said they were hard to understand. And he said people who are untaught and unstable, they twist them. See, they get them wrong. But this is it's not just the hard ones. He said they twist the easy ones too. You notice that verse says that, as they do also the other, you see. So they twist the hard ones, but they get the easy ones wrong. Brother Rogers at the North Broad Street Church of Christ, in all his little articles, he's twisting the easy ones, aren't you? See, he's unstable, and he's untaught, and he's twisting some that's weighty, But he's also twisting just very plain, simple passages. He denies, certain things. Really, the inspiration of the scriptures, even, it seems to me. He denies, that there's one church. He says that now there's Christians in all the churches. He denies, that we ought to sing a cappella. So he just twists very plain, simple ones also. That's what this is talking about, people like him. Maybe he'll tune in at some point and catch this. Is why I'm wanting to call his name. And incidentally, I've been reaching out to him, like periodically, and trying to get together with him. So let's start here with this verse 5 to give us a little context. Paul says, of such a one, referring to this man that he knew that had been caught up into the third heaven and to paradise, he said, yet I myself will not boast except in my infirmities. Now he said, now I'll boast in this one. Of such a one I will boast. He says, yet of myself I will not boast except in my infirmities. So I'll boast in this man because what he's been through, what this man I knew in Christ, he actually got to go into the heavens in body or spirit, and he heard things that a man doesn't have authority to speak. So he couldn't bring that back down here. When he got back down here, he couldn't tell what he heard. Now that's not unique. You might remember when they come down from the Mount of Transfiguration, and incidentally, that was a vision, that they saw. The Bible calls it such. But Jesus said, don't tell anybody until a certain time. See, when you see certain things they saw, they couldn't always just run and tell it. Now, see, Peter ran and told what happened to him when the sheets opened up, and God said, rise, Peter, kill and eat. to show Peter that the Gentiles, see, had been cleansed by God, that they were now accepted by him. And so Peter went and he told it, didn't he? He brought it up when they were discussing it in Acts 15. He brought that up and said, now wait, I saw some stuff, and he tells what he saw. And he went back and reported it when he saw it, you see. But this man heard things that was unspeakable, not authorized for a man to speak. Paul said, unique, isn't it? Interesting, as they witnessed these miraculous things at times. But be that as it may, then now he says, he's been saying this. He done said this about 10 times. Yet of myself I'll not boast except in my infirmities. See, now I'm not going to boast, with the exception, you see, of these hardships. And they detailed throughout the first letter, they detailed here for us in this 11th chapter. They detailed in chapter 6 of this book, this second book, chapter 4 of the first book. But just all these needs, distresses, hardships, infirmities. And incidentally, this word infirmities seems to be synecdoche to me, to represent this class of sufferings and trouble that showed his need for God. You know, I'm not going to boast except in my infirmities. When you look up here at this list, you got stonings, you got thirst, you got hungerings. See, all these different things that he's boasting about, he said foolishly, bear with me a little in a little folly, and he lays out this list, but this list is all over the place in terms of a category of things. If you see what, so I take this word, when he says, I won't boast except in my infirmities, and I got all these things that he's listing here, then I take it that those are infirmities. And so this infirmities must be that synecdoche where the part represents the whole. Here's a part of his sufferings, an aspect of them, but it's used. I'm only going to boast in my infirmities, but he's boasting in his persecutions. That word infirmities is in wants, in my weaknesses. That's what that word means there. I'm only going to boast in the things that show my weakness, my need for God. I really think that's the idea. Any comments on that, or anybody see that a little different? It's not that big of a point, but I do think that's what's in play, because as I read, he keeps talking about these infirmities, and yet I see a list of beatings and stonings and things like that as well. Not just, what you might typically call this thorn in the flesh that he's fixing to mention. See, something that might be a health issue or some impediment or some deformity or some whatever. Some things beyond that, sickness, because he's talking up here about journeys and perils and troubles and needs and necessities, all of that. But at verse 6 he says, for though I might desire to boast, I'll not be a fool, for I'll speak the truth, but I refrain, lest anyone should think of me above what he sees me to be or hears of me. And so, let me, I guess, say what I at least am I'm uncertain about what this means, somewhat settled on, is typically what, commentators and people that look at these things, here's what they suggest this is saying, that I'm not going to I'm not going to boast, but even if I did, I wouldn't be a fool in that, because it'd be the truth. Now it don't look like that when you read it, but that's what that's I think the majority view on this passage is that he's saying, like, read the ESV. Listen to this. 6.
So if I should wish to boast, I would not be a fool, for I would be speaking the truth, but I refrain from it so that no one may think more of me than he sees in me or hears from me.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it ain't bragging if it's true. We use that expression. That is not really boasting if it's true. That though I might desire to boast, I'm not going to be a fool because I wouldn't be one, because I'd be telling the truth. Now, here's what I think it says. I think it says, let me read it. I'm going to just take it. I think it says, now, I might desire to boast, but I'm not going to be foolish and do it, run around boasting. But I am going to speak the truth. Now I'm going to refrain. Here's the balance of it. But I'm going to refrain from boasting, lest anyone should think of me above what he sees me to be or hears of me. So this is what I mean about weighty. When you look at the ESV, NIV, American Standard, King James Version, New King James Version, they all use different punctuation. It's all in different places. It's all in different places. And so I called Pat and I said, I read him my version. He said, here's what I think it, and then I read him, we read together another version. He said, oh, wait a minute, that seems to really, I said, yeah, it did to me too. Made me, I thought it was this, and then so I say that not to confuse, but just to show. Now, we ought to be able to see, that's not that big a point. He said this 3 or 4 times throughout this book, this type thing. I'm normal circumstances, I wouldn't be running around boasting. He feels compelled here, doesn't he? He says that, doesn't he? At verse 11, listen, I have become a fool in boasting. You have compelled me. For I ought to have been commended by you, for in nothing was I behind the most eminent apostles, though I'm nothing. So you see, this is an unusual circumstance, it seems, that he's raising this issue that you pushed me into this, like I had to do it. And we pointed out clearly, I read the verse that showed he wanted them to do it. He expected them to do it. And he says this here, I should have been commended by you. See, that these guys that have come in here, these super apostles, these most eminent ones, these great ones, I'm not behind these guys in anything. And you guys, as a congregation, aren't behind anybody. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. The only way in which you might be inferior is that I didn't take support from you. That's it. He says you in no other way. Truly, verse 12, the signs of an apostle were accomplished among you with all perseverance and signs and wonders and mighty deeds. For what is it in which you were inferior to other churches, except that I myself was not burdensome to you? And then he says, forgive me this wrong. But be that as it may, he feels, pushed into this, but by them. you compelled me to go down this road of having to show this difference in me and these false brethren. See, I shouldn't have to. So, at verse 7, he says, and he's explaining, Itney, that the reason I don't want to boast, that I won't go down that road, is I don't want anybody to elevate me. And I don't want to elevate myself. So, but I refrain the end of verse 6b, lest anyone should think of me above what he sees me to be or hears from me. Now, this point here is an important point because it shows the way we ought to view a preacher. That we shouldn't elevate men. We all know that. But what's the standard? You know, we test them, don't we? We try the spirits. But here Paul is explaining, don't think of me above what you see. See, so if a man is living right there, that's what he is. See, and then he says, and don't think of me above what you've heard from me. There it is. See, what does he preach? What does he teach? Okay, he good, solid man, teach the truth. Right there, just hold him right as far as we need to go with Brother Hall, right there. Just what he says, and then watch his life, and then you see how he lives, and that's him. You got him in a nutshell. Don't, as far as you go, right there. See, that you might not think of me above, see, over and above what you see in me. Just go with that. My life. See, that's why Paul could confidently say that when he wrote, we try our best not to offend in anything, see, so that we don't bring any shame and reproach on our ministry. We have to walk the walk. And that's what he's saying. Go with that. What you see, the things that you've heard and seen and saw in me, these do. Just what you can put your hand on, what you can match to this book. And that's how we ought to view men. Nothing above that. As great as men, we know men like Brother Sutton, who had great talent and abilities. How should we view them? Just only what we saw in them and what we heard from them. That's it. Don't go as far as we go with them right there. Any thoughts or comments on that? But I thought that, that's as profound a point as you can get. But that's the subject here, see, is elevating men. See? And I refrain from boasting, because what if Paul ran around rattling off his list in chapter 11 for the fun of, to draw attention to himself? Boy, you'd really be like, that's an intimidating list, isn't it? You see? And you thinking, boy, he's close to Jesus. And I've heard, you've heard people say the closest thing I've seen to Jesus is Paul. Paul can't walk in the Lord's shoes. The Lord never did do anything wrong. The Lord never thought nothing wrong, but Paul certainly did. Paul killed Christians. You're talking about the closest thing to Jesus. Man, ain't no such thing. But I know what they mean by that. But see, this book, this right here, just go with what you can see in a man. Lie. And stop right there. And what he preaches and teaches. And just go with that. He's no larger or bigger than that. And so that others wouldn't do it, he said, I'm not going to boast. But then he says, unless I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelation. See, he had already said, I'm going to come to visions and revelations. A thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Now, this sense seemed to be so that Paul wouldn't get the big head. I struggled with that. I looked at the different renderings of it, make it sound like God gave him this thorn in the flesh so others wouldn't elevate Paul. Well, he done addressed others, I believe, in this previous verse. And then he says, but so that I wouldn't get the big head, God gave me a thorn in the flesh. And really, who gave it to him? Who harmed Paul? Anybody want to guess? Really, the devil did, didn't he? Satan. The tormentor and accuser of men. And that verse really points that out. You know, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me. So this wasn't God's doing. Now, he allowed it. Doesn't this conjure up images of Job and Peter? You know, Peter, Satan has asked for you that he might sift you as wheat, but I have prayed for you. Incidentally, Jeremy, that, you know, when it says, and Satan has asked for you, that you there is plural, and is talking about all of the apostles. Incidentally, you know, Satan has asked for you, that's plural there. And then it says, but I have prayed for you, Peter, that you, see, interesting there. But incidentally, when that he asked for all of them. And if you look at that carefully, you'll find that out that's actually a plural, Y-O-U there. So Satan tries to get us, and he was sent a messenger of Satan to whatever Paul had. Of course, it's obviously not mentioned here, and there's been a lot of commentary on it. I hold the position we absolutely do not know what it was. Anybody see that different or know what it was? You know, maybe have stumbled up on something. Now again, I know, you know, he said I'm rude, and they said Paul, you know, spoke a certain way and things like that, and some suspect he stuttered, all kind of little summations and stuff. But be that as it may, God would have told us, wouldn't he, if it's critical information. So, but its purpose was so that Paul wouldn't get the big head. Let me, if I can get to it fast enough, I'm going to read a rendering or two, just for information. The NIV says, or because of these surpassingly great revelations, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh. The ESV says, to keep me from becoming conceited, because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations, a thorn was given to me. The King James says, and lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given a thorn to me. And the New American says, for this reason, to keep me from exalting myself, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh. And so you can see it seems to be, you know, this was aimed at Paul not getting the big head. Any comments or thoughts along those lines? Okay, yes, sir, Gerald.
Just a quick comment.
Please do.
It says, for though I would desire to glory. I think this is, of course, before it takes us back, connects us with the previous statements. I believe this is kind of a clarification or maybe an indication that he is referencing that he is the one that is taken up in the spirit or taken up to the third heaven, because he says, for though I would desire to glory, what is he going to glory about? It seems that it's indication that may be suggesting that glorying about being the one that is taken up in the third heaven.
Okay.
I think that may be an indication of that.
Okay.
And yet he says, a little later, he says, but now I forbear.
Mhm.
So he's decided not to glory about that, but he makes the statements, expedient, verse 1, it is not expedient for me, doubtless to glory, I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. He tells about this, but he doesn't glory in that. He just makes the statement of events that took place, and yet he doesn't go into detail and glory about it. But he, I think, is separating himself from those that would be the false apostles, etc. And then he goes into your explanation of the need for the thorn in the flesh to keep him from being up, to keep him humble.
That's excellent. Well put. And, you know, we mentioned, didn't we, that very well may be just exactly what that's saying. That's a good, solid, sound explanation of it to me. And I appreciate that. Any other comments or thoughts? And incidentally, that is the predominant view on that passage too, also. That is referring to Paul himself. So we got 5 minutes left. So Paul said, whatever this thorn was, I asked the Lord, I pleaded with him 3 times that it might depart from me. So this, I think we can learn that it's okay to ask, you know, more than one time for trouble that we might have or things that we might have in our lives. That to me, there's just clear apostolic approval of pleading with God for multiple times for the same, on the same issue or problem that you're facing. So don't ever let anybody, you know, tell you otherwise, that it's wrong to keep asking for things. And incidentally, that 3 times, you know, Jesus, on the night of his betrayal, pleaded with the Lord. Some translation says, and he said the same, and on the 3rd time, he said the same thing, you see. And so, and incidentally, 3 times he asked. So there, you know, maybe there's something to that. Since an apostle did it, and then our Lord did it 3 times. So don't stop at 1. Whatever you do, let's keep asking. We got good people asking 3 times at least, you know. So, any thoughts or comments on that? But I think that's, you know, a beautiful example of us. And this isn't just a casual asking, isn't it? This is a pleading with God, you see. And I think there's good lessons for us there as well. Paul says that it, you know, I've read some people say, you know, it was a person because it said a messenger of Satan, you know. And then you got down here, Paul says, I pleaded with the Lord that it might depart from me. That is not a person, is it? It's a thing. Whatever it was, this thorn in the flesh was a it. We know that much. So, and he said to me, now this is after Paul's asking, my grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I'll rather boast in my infirmities that the power of Christ may rest upon me. And so there's the Lord intervened after Paul asked, and the Lord said to Paul, my grace is sufficient for you, Paul. I'm not going to remove this from you. That what I have to offer you, this good grace, it's all you need. And he's explained why, because my power, Paul, he says, works its strongest when men are at their lowest. Right? Isn't that what he's saying? My grace is sufficient, for my strength is made perfect, complete in weakness. So this thing you have, I know you feel weak, don't you? That no way you can get the big head with whatever it is you got on your shoulder, having to bear. But can't you see? I want you to trust in me. I'll help you through this, whatever it is. My strength is made perfect in weakness. Let me read this as we conclude, just this passage. I won't comment on it. I just want to read it. What he said in chapter 4 of this book. We have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us. That's what that verse is saying. See, he put it in us on purpose so that you could see the power, the excellence of it. What you saw Paul and them going through, you see God working. Thank y'all very much for your good comments, Gerald, and others also. Appreciate y'all's